Good evening and welcome to the Legion Cantina. In today's episode, we'll be running through all the options in the core slot for the Rebel faction. So, in the hotly anticipated follow-up to the hour-long epic that the previous video was, I've decided to just go through one by one, one slot at a time, because turns out talking for an hour about Legion does really have a noticeable effect on your sanity. But yeah, we're going to go through the Rebel core. I think there are 5 or 6 in total, and just talk about how thematic, how powerful each of them are, and if there's any particular sort of combinations I think you should be running. So to get right into it, we'll talk about Fleet Troopers first, and I've got a bit of a soft spot for these guys. I think you don't necessarily see them that much in super competitive lists, but I think, as I've said a few times, squad of Fleet Troopers with a scattergun hiding behind a building is always a really nice thing to have on your side. And when they're coming in at just over 60 points, does feel like a pretty good deal for the potential damage output that they can be throwing out. So they can be pretty hard hitting. They are definitely flimsy, and in general, you're looking for in and around that sort of that arc range of that range 2 or into that charge combination. With the shotgun, they're generally putting out about 5 PS1 is what you can expect from their dice pool. So you get 8 white from the base squad and then 2 red from the shotgun with PS1. So yeah, getting that 5 PS1 is not uncommon. And that can put some serious damage into squad of droidicas or even another core squad, for instance. Like against another rebel core unit, it's not uncommon to one shot with fleet troopers if that's the kind of thing you're looking to do. So they definitely do have some nice uses in that up close and personal department. Their big weakness, aside from the fact they are limited to range 2 and melee, is that courage 1. And if you lose a single action with these guys on the turn you're planning to charge in, it can just be completely crippling. Like, you generally, if you are charging another unit, or even if you're move shooting, obviously you're going to need both of those actions. So yeah, it's rough, and realistically, even if they've got like 1 suppression on, you're probably not getting that suppression off, so you're probably losing an action. And as soon as you're getting 2 or 3, you can almost guarantee you are obviously only getting 1 action. So trying to keep them out of line of sight, or if you've got Inspire and things like that to keep those actions going, can be super valuable. I generally wouldn't take more than 1, especially in the world where we're going to see quite a lot of Sleeper Cell in the future. Sleeper Cell effectively do what fleets do, but better. And while fleets do fulfill that core slot in quite a nice way, I think there are diminishing returns. Like running 3 of these and 3 Sleeper Cell, I think would just leave you very vulnerable in those kind of long range early skirmishes that you can see in games of Legion. So while I do like these guys, I think more than 1 squad is probably not the way to go. And final thing, prepared positions or transporting in a bus is not bad with these guys. Like, if you are really stuck for a third advantage, there are significantly worse things to do than chucking these guys behind a building early on that's a bit further up maybe. Yeah, not necessarily again a very meta thing to do, but it can be a nice thing to have, and they will generally make back their points as long as they're used carefully. Obviously, I've put their theme and their power both as a B. Theme-wise, I don't think they do anything particularly special. Like, they have their niche, the sort of charging, fairly hard-hitting core slot for rebels, and their power levels are B. Like, they have some pretty serious downsides, but they also have some pretty nice upsides as well. So you kind of get not the best of both worlds, what I was about to say, but in their niche, they are pretty solid and they are pretty good value. And obviously, fulfilling that core criteria is really nice. Moving over to the bread and butter of the Rebel faction is the Humble Rebel Trooper. Obviously, Agile 1 was a bit of a game changer for these guys. It just gives them so much more survivability, and no longer means, you had to do like move dodge. Now you can do move, and you get 2 dodges, so it's just better in so many ways. And as I will continue to say, anything that procs off of movement in this game is inherently so valuable, be it tactical, be it agile, be it charge, be it relentless, like anything like that is just super valuable because you are going to have to be moving so much. In general, I use mine as sort of, I'd stick an Astro on them, hide them at the back, move around a bit. If, you're on a shifting or a recover, or, you need to challenge something on bunker assault to stop somebody taking it, like, these guys are just fairly useful for kind of running onto objective for 1 or 2 turns, and it feels bad hitting through those dodges, especially with Nimble, if you have to go in for another hit on Rebel Troopers. Like, basically, unless you're one-hitting these guys, it doesn't feel great, and I think Rebel Troopers can generally cling on for an attack or two as long as you're able to get those dodges on them in advance. As I say, Astro is great for just a bit of repair, and if you are looking for a heavy weapon, I personally would always spend the extra points to go for the ion gun. I think even though it doesn't have the range 4 that the crit 1 gun has, I think it does just offer you so much, and in a world where we're seeing lots of vehicles, you're going to see a fair bit of droids. I think that it's always a nice thing to have, and anything that robs actions from droids is super valuable. So yeah, worth spending those extra points if you are going to take a heavy weapon on them. And as I say, I think they're just the go-to option. I think they are definitely a B tier unit. Like, don't do anything super special, but they will be at the upper end of B tier because you have to take some core. I've said before about, there's an argument these guys are S tier because they are the best Rebel core and you have to run some core, but I don't think that's quite how I'm going to interpret them in this case. But you could definitely make the argument that they should be further up just because they are the best in their slot. Rebel Vets. It's just it. I've run a few Rebel Vets recently, and I don't like them. I think prepared positions is an interesting one because, as far as I can tell, you either want like one unit to prepared position, i.e., Anakin or something, in a hidden position early on in the game where they can't be shot, but it gains them, an extra turn of movement or something. Or you want so much that it's not relevant that your opponent can, pick off maybe one or two of them. You are getting the advantage of just having so many on the board. So if you're running Echo Base with a bunch of these with the heavy blasters, then maybe that's not a bad thing, but I personally don't like it. And I think telegraphing your plays in this way, especially with a unit that struggles with mobility as much as these guys do, is a bit of a problem. And I don't think that dodge, and I don't think the prepared position is enough to overcome some of the firepower that some lists are able to throw down now. Snails, saber tanks, even a bunch of ATRTs can probably shred through a squad of these pretty quickly. So, yeah, it's not ideal. Low profile is fine. I think a buff that could be made to low profile is that you basically, it happens after you've done the defense die rolls. Maybe. So if you've got any blanks, you take an additional one away, because basically that would move it from 5/6 of a save if you're in light cover, or 2/3 of a save if you're in heavy cover, to just removing an entire one. But then it basically functions like a dodge, so maybe it's not unique enough, and then it basically becomes like kind of having nimble, so maybe, but currently low profile just doesn't feel that impactful. But removing an extra hit isn't too bad, and yeah, I don't know. I think the big problem for Rebel Vets is they're more expensive than Rebel Troopers, and they don't have Courage 2, and they're less mobile. And I think for those things, unfortunately, what you are wanting your core to do in Rebels now is fulfill the core criteria, and if possible, give a little bit of support to your more powerful unit. And for that reason, I would much rather spend 48 points on Rebel Troopers and an Astro than Rebel Veterans with nothing. They do have a pretty good heavy weapon. And if I was running a squad of vets, I would run them with a base squad and just the heavy weapon, I think. I did try the mega squad with Lando and the guidance standby and things like that, and there's maybe something there, but not in the state where that squad of Rebel Veterans costs like 140 points and can, in my case, get one hit by Anakin. So probably not something that will be competitive, but I think with Lando's kit, maybe if vets get a bit better, there's possibly something there. But and they are the only core option in Echo Base, so in that case, if you want to run it, you're going to have to take them. But yeah, I've got a few squads of vets, and they are pretty thematic. They're fairly fun in that regard because, they feel like a desperate force struggling against an objectively superior enemy, no matter who they're fighting. But you have better options for Rebel Core if you want to take them. So for that reason, they're a C tier, and I think they are probably Rebel's worst core option, aside from one, which I think is probably Rebel's worst unit. MK2 Blaster. This is one of the bonuses of being able to take vets. I'd argue these guys are pretty good. They obviously will come down with that prepared position with the vets, and the Sentinel is nice. In a world where lots of firepower in the game is range 2 or melee, range 3 standby, and the ability to get it from fire support, not bad. And for the early turns in an echo-based list, there are worse options. They are technically Rebel's cheapest core as well, so that's something. You know, it sort of slightly subsidizes the cost of the vets in some ways, but they don't make up for the fact I think the vets are on the weaker side. Yeah, they have some nice keywords. The crit 2. I think it's interesting that see this with the vets as well. A unit that surged to hit getting crit 2 just doesn't feel as good for some reason. Like, I think one of the reasons the Rebel Ion gun, or the whatever the range 4 gun's called, getting that crit 1, it just feels really nice because you move from a surge doing nothing to actually that crit being quite a big deal, especially with the Ion and the impact on the Ion gun. So I think, yeah, it's just not maybe as impactful on a unit that surges to hit anyway, especially when cover is as flimsy as it is. So they're not a bad unit, and if you're taking a squad of vets, you'll probably bring in one of these guys along too. That Courage 2 is also quite nice, and they do move deceptively quickly with their big base as well. It's worth noting. Obviously, they are only speed 1, but when you have, I think it's a similar to Torn style size of base, it's not a bad move at all, and I think they are technically able to climb as well, so you can pull off some quite nice tricks there. So, yeah, not a terrible unit, and I think if vets get a bit better, you'll probably see a few more of these guys around, but as they are tied to those vets and they currently aren't that competitive, you don't see that much of them. Ewok Skirmishers, I'm going to go ahead and say I think they're Rebel's worst unit. I think there's so many things that confuse me about this unit. As far as I can tell, they're almost objectively worse than the Ewok Slingers, aside from the fact they sit in the core slot, but the benefit of them being in the core slot just doesn't feel that relevant when they're a mercenary, because generally you're only taking core to fulfill that criteria anyway. So while the skirmishers are in a more competitive slot, the slingers are in a more competitive slot, I think they are just almost objectively stronger than the Ewok skirmishers. Yeah, they're melee only, and even in melee, they're not great. 6 of them with non-surging black means 3 hits on average, which, you know, against almost anything is probably going down to 2, maybe 1 wounds. And then after that, what do you really do? You don't get surging either way. Yeah, it's not great. The Axe Ewok is a decent upgrade, especially if you're, you know, planning to take the, the charging squad and things like that. And you can do mega skirmishers and take a trapper and all these things. But I just don't really ever see a reason to run these guys. Yeah, if you want objective cappers, I think Rebel Troopers are almost strictly better. Like, they are more survivable, they're able to generate the dodges, and you have more options for utility and support takes on the Rebel Troopers. So yeah, it's bad, and this is D tier for me. I can't see an argument. I'm really struggling to think of a unit apart from maybe R2 that they're more competitive than, but that would actually be an interesting one. Which would you rather bring in a competitive list, R2 or Ewoks? I guess at least R2 can score you a point with secret missions, so maybe he is better. The theme's not bad, you know. They're relatively like sneaky. They got their low profile. They got the unhindered. Like, they can at least move to objectives, but then they're just going to get blown up in one turn. So yeah, not really a thing. And if they were better, you know, Bright Tree would be better, and maybe they'd have more an impact on Rebel lists. But as it is, I just don't see them having much impact at all. Pikes, they are. I think if you could take them as a unit that fulfilled the minimum core criteria in Rebels, I think you could make an argument there maybe would be Rebels' best core option. They have one of the best heavy weapon upgrades out there for me. I think the range 4, I can't remember what it's called, but the range 4 gun with the impact on, and I think it's 2 blacks and a red, is really nice, especially if you're taking the capo upgrade to give you that surge, that free surge as well for that surge to hit. Feels really good. I personally would take the capo and the heavy weapon if I was running them. Wouldn't really bother with the whip, but I'd take the capo and the heavy weapon just because that Courage 2 is really nice for the Pikes, because they can't share Rebel leader's courage because of their self-preservation rule. So yeah, they're not bad, and I think the theme's pretty good. Like, they're going to do their own thing. They're pretty independent. They're fairly survivable. Yeah, I kind of miss the days of it was pre 2.6 change, where there was actually a debate between, you know, did you run the commandos with the sniper, did you run these guys as a supplement to your Rebel core and things like that. They were a fun unit to use, and I think having run them a couple of times in this edition, they're better than maybe people might expect, but I don't think they are powerful enough to merit taking them over other more powerful things that rebels have access to. They are fairly survivable. Like, once you get Danger Sense 2 ramped up and that independent dodge, like, you can see it. You used to see it with Pathfinders, you see it with Cassian sometimes. Like, sometimes just having those extra white defense die and you only have to roll a little bit hot can really keep you going quite well. And against, especially, plink damage, when you're rolling 3 white dice against just 1 hit, you should on average actually save it most of the time. So that can really help. And where they've got that outmaneuver and they're dodging those crits, it's not bad at all. Yeah, as I say, if they fulfilled the minimum core criteria, they'd be better. But as it is, because they don't fulfill that, I am putting them at a C tier, just because you would have to take these on top of other core in order to take them. But yeah, that's all the Rebel core reviewed. Obviously, next time we're going to be moving on to the Rebel Special Forces. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Again, I'm not saying these are factually correct. In fact, it's impossible to be factually correct on any of these. These are just my opinions, and I think Rebel Core is in an okay spot, but not where the power of the faction is. So while you could make an argument that the best of these should be an S tier, I'm quite happy putting these down in B tier in terms of their power level. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comments below, and I'll see you for the next one.